there are, and I'm sure I can speak to a number of you, but we host these on a regular basis. There are 8 to 12 of these that we host every month. I feel like this is a perfect real transition into how we get started. This today is our construction and building materials. It's a reoccurring link of how you guys registered, so you can continue to use the same link. And each month we have a different speaker that comes on. Today, Mattie Mead is on with Hempitecture. Real quick, before we get started and I turn the mic over, I want to tell all of you, for those of you that are not familiar with Zoom and the format of our meetings, I will help moderate the questions. Occasionally, we'll open it up. When we get big groups like this, it's a little bit challenging. When we do open it up and you have a question, ask your question, make sure you unmute yourself and then remute yourself. If you're not speaking, please keep yourself on mute. I do have control of that. However, I like to just trust and not have to worry about it. So just make sure that it's on mute. Other than that, Mattie, we have a whole group of questions. I'll turn it over and let you do an intro and just kind of share what you're working on. And then I'll kind of dive in. If you guys do have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. You can move people around on your screen as people log in. I move the people that are speaking up to the top. If somebody does not have their hand raised, I believe you can move them. And so just know that if you want to move Mattie up to the top, or myself or anybody else that you have intention of connecting with or can see, just know that that's very pliable or flexible. Also in the top, there's a screen, top right-hand side, there's a view button that allows you to change to speaker view or the little blocks and so forth. You can drop your contact information in. Unfortunately, it doesn't allow you to copy the chat, but you can, of course, write it down. For members, we do send out a transcribed copy of all of our meetings as well as links. Other than that, they will be shared. The meeting will be shared on our YouTube channel, so you guys can review it and reconnect at the end. Things aren't as obviously visible when it's recorded, so it's definitely better when you get logged in. And then last but not least, we are a membership-based group. It's $75 a month to attend. You get to attend as many times as you want as a member. There's lots of opportunities for us to help you guys drive leads, make connections, build relationships on both the panel side as well as the guest speaker side. And so we have a team of people that are actively reaching out and building relationships and making connections to bring them to our meetings. Last month, I think we had just over 500 people attend our meetings. And so it's a great opportunity to really connect with a strategic audience. So for those of you that are new, thank you very much. For those of you that are returning, thank you for inviting other people and participating. And thank you very much for our members and our sponsor today, Bob. Do you want to do a real quick intro as a sponsor? One of our sponsors, and then Mattie, it's all you after this.
Okay, I'm Bob Moore. I'm based in Oklahoma, and I do commercial financing. And my background, I've been doing commercial financing for 40 years, and got an ag background, and this is what we do. And got involved in doing the hemp and the industrial hemp and the cannabis, and got some success and got some things financed, and looking to do a whole lot more. So if you've got questions, you're welcome to call me, email me, and I'll be glad to visit with you. Okay.
Thanks, Bob.
I think you can find me on the screen up here. Yep,
and on the website. Bob's also on our board for the association, and so he is on the website as well. Mattie, I'd love an intro and to kind of take it away, and then we can filter questions from there. But thank you very, very much for joining me today.
Great. Thanks so much, Mandi. Thanks everyone else for being here. I have a little bit of a talk that I'm going to go through that maybe will answer a lot of the questions that you already have. And I'll start with an overview of just, who I am, my background, and just to kind of give you an outline of where I'm going with this, so you can kind of hold your questions for those sections. I'm going to first just give that overview, talk about why hemp-based building materials. We'll talk about the benefits of hempcrete or hemp lime, the benefits of hemp wool, natural fiber insulation, and then, really kind of start to zoom out a little bit and talk about what's holding back the adoption of hemp-based building materials. and where do we go from here? What's to come within this new and emerging industry? So good morning, everyone. I guess good morning on the Mountain Time Zone and Pacific Time Zone. Good afternoon to those of you that are on the East Coast. My name is Mattie Mead. You can call me. I'm the founder and CEO of Hempitecture. Hempitecture is a public benefit corporation with a mission to help build a better world using natural bio-based materials. I always like to kind of share the origin story of Hempitecture, just so you know how I got into this industry, because I'm often asked that. I'm interested in hempcrete or interested in natural materials. Where do I start? Where do I begin in my industry? Or in this industry rather. So I grew up in the Northeast. I'm from Morristown, New Jersey, just in the shadow of New York City. I live a world away from there now. I'm currently in Sun Valley, Idaho. If you had asked me 10 years ago if I had lived in Idaho, I would have said, where the heck is Idaho? It was not in the game plan for me, and I'll share how I ended up out here. But when I was an undergraduate student studying architecture and environmental sciences at Hobart and William Smith colleges in the beautiful Finger Lakes region of western upstate New York, I saw a mountain grow in the distance. That mountain, of course, was one of the largest super landfills in the Northeast, Seneca Meadows landfill. It's actually in Seneca Falls, which is the home of women's suffrage, and over the years has become quite a kind of downtrodden place, devoid of a lot of economic opportunity. And so to create jobs, create economic opportunity in this area, they commissioned what is now the largest landfill in the Northeast that takes in trash from the tri-state area. So for those of you that are not familiar, that's New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut, and the surrounding areas. And it was amazing to just see this huge mountain of garbage grow. And I became really interested as to what was going into that landfill. And I found out that a large portion of landfill waste here in the United States is construction and demolition waste. So kind of, raised a flag in my mind of, this seems like a problem. And then in my architecture studies, started to think more about our built environment and the relationship of the built environment and the natural world. One of the benefits of going to a liberal arts school is you get to have your hands in a lot of different subjects. And with my environmental sciences minor and my architecture major, I started to think more about the relationship of the two. We really kind of impose the built environment on our natural world, and I often don't pay much attention to the impact that the imposition of that natural environment has on the built environment. So one statistic in particular that came to mind that was really interesting to me was, about 40% of our domestic energy consumption and about 40% of our carbon footprint actually comes from buildings and their operations, meaning the energy required to heat and cool the buildings that we are all sitting in right now, unless you're outside sitting on a park bench, are consuming energy, and they're contributing to that about 40% energy consumption. So with this idea of, a landfill waste problem and this idea of a huge carbon footprint really impacting our built environment, therefore impacting our natural world, I became really interested in the idea of looking at natural materials or lower carbon footprint materials to build a better built environment. So in 2012, my senior year, I basically dedicated to researching through a thesis study that I called The Contemporary Relevance of Earth Architecture. And I looked at different vernacular archetypes used across the world. What did people build with and use before we invented modern processes for building materials? So my research took me really across the world, from the American Southwest, looking at adobe and rammed earth, to cob and straw bale, and then over in Europe looking at wattle and daub, even masonry-based buildings and buildings that were built into the hillside. And I became really fascinated with the idea of using hemp-based materials as I learned about it being used in France, Belgium, and the Netherlands at the time. So again, remember that this is 2012, about 6 years before the federal farm bill was passed. My earliest concept for Hempitecture, which I trademarked the name Hempitecture when I was still a student, because I was really excited and I thought, wow, what an opportunity to bring hemp-based building materials here to the United States. In doing some more research, I found out that hemp-based building materials were not widely used here. It didn't take too much more research to learn why. And again, it's that Farm Bill element. Industrial hemp was a Schedule I substance, fully illegal. But that earliest concept of Hempitecture was an insulating, interlocking building block product development concept. You can look at some of my presentations that are probably on YouTube from 2012, where you see a design of building blocks that are really similar to what's now being commercialized in Europe, which is exciting to see that idea, at least in some parts of the world, is really taking root. So being a boundlessly optimistic young person with a world ahead of me, I decided it's time to go out and get seed funding. I'm going to raise money and we're going to build the North America's first hempcrete block facility. And I presented this concept at all these business plan competitions, 4 business plan competitions, in fact, all across the Northeast, one of which was a global competition. And I was the Northeastern finalist. Inevitably, time and time again, as I'd make it to the top 3 and present in front of 250 to 300 people in front of a panel of venture capital judges, they would laugh at me and say, "You are out of your mind. You must be smoking your blocks. You must be from another planet. This is never going to happen here in the United States. You're trying to build houses with a Schedule I substance." And I said, well, at this point now, it's 2013. I think that industrial hemp is going to be legal in 5 years. And my efforts now are to get in on the ground floor of what I believe will be an emerging industry here in the United States. That wasn't enough to win any seed funding. Did receive some notable recognition and made some connections and some progress and moved forward a little bit. But ultimately, after my senior year of college, was told, this is not going to happen. Give it up. Maybe go work in a cubicle for some company in New York City. And that really wasn't my path. That wasn't the way that I wanted to go. And I really believed in the opportunity afforded by hemp-based building materials, because at the time, there were fewer than 5 hempcrete buildings in the United States. So after my time in college, feeling a little bit downtrodden, a little bit bummed out, but still wanting to further my career in sustainability and architecture and designing of sustainable, high-performing structures, I did what any reasonable downtrodden recent grad would do. And I went to St. John in the U.S. Virgin Islands to heal my wounds on the beach and work at an eco resort where I learned about solar power, rainwater harvesting, and really living in harmony with the environment, especially in a place where the environment is very fragile. And it was at this time in St. John that I really started to connect with the making of homes. In college, it's very conceptual. You're, designing things. It's not about, actually the tactile process of putting things together. And so I'm working in St. John and, thinking, okay, this is a step forward towards, moving towards this goal of understanding sustainability, understanding how to incorporate these sustainable ideas in construction. And one day my phone rang, and it was a 208 number, which I've now come to know is the Idaho area code. So when your phone rings and it's someone from Idaho, it says 208. I picked up the phone and this guy was on the other end, and he said, "Hey, is this Mattie Mead?" And I said, "Yes, it is." And he said, "You were in the Northeast Business Plan competition, presenting Hempitecture, right?" And I said, "Yes, yeah, I was." And he said, you lost that competition, right?" I said, "Yes. Okay. Well, where's this going? Are you calling me to just bust my chops? What's the deal?" And he said, "Well, no, actually, I thought what you were doing is really, really fascinating and cool. And I want to know if you'd consider moving to Idaho and build one of these hempcrete buildings that you talked about in your presentation." And I said, to be honest, man, I don't even know where Idaho is, but if you're going to pay me to build a hempcrete building, this is the path that I want to pursue. I'd go just about anywhere to make this happen. So I really uprooted my life that I was establishing, convinced a friend to drive me to Idaho. I didn't even own a car at the time, and landed in beautiful Sun Valley, Idaho, which if you've never been, and I highly recommend, it's a ski resort community. But this project was for a nonprofit organization, really 40 minutes from Ketchum or Sun Valley in the middle of nowhere. So it was quite a lesson in not forgetting things at the hardware store when you're building something, because you're not going back to the hardware store. Your day is done if you don't have the right screws, I learned. So this process was incredibly formative for me as a young person looking to, prove this concept of the viability of hemp-based building materials. Ultimately, this building became the first public use hempcrete building in the United States. We call it public use. Commercial would be another term for it, but it's a community center for a nonprofit organization. And this nonprofit organization's mission is to connect generally the underserved, whether it's teens in inner city communities, and bring them out to this place, Idaho Basecamp, and provide them a nature experience, provide them an opportunity to really connect with each other, their community, and then connect with nature at large. And so the idea of natural building with hempcrete really fits into the ethos of, this property, this campus, if you will, because not only is it in a beautiful setting on a river with the view of the tallest mountain in Idaho, but when you're in the space, the natural buildings that are on the property, you're not separated from nature. You're still within nature. And so early on, that was a really compelling idea of this continuity between the built environment and the natural world, in that when you build an environment, as in a shelter, a building, a home with natural materials, there is this sense of continuity between inside and outside, and a relationship between the two, since you are using materials from the earth. So fast forward a little bit, after working in the architecture studio and designing this building for about 4 or 5 months with an architect mentor of mine, and then going out into the field and building this hempcrete building with the same blueprints that I drew. I'd have the plans this way and turn them sideways and turn them upside down, and wow, this doesn't make any sense. And I drew this. So there is a huge disconnect here between the world of architecture and the world of implementation. And I think that's a really important theme here, because I know there's so much interest out there in building with hempcrete, but project delivery requires everybody to be on the same page. Just because you want to build a hempcrete home doesn't mean that you have an architect that understands it or a builder that understands it. In my earliest situation, I was fortunate to be that person that was the architect, to be that person that was the builder, and to really realize some of the roadblocks and challenges that exist. So in recognizing that this is difficult, this is not easy to do something that has been done very rarely before, particularly in the United States, I took a step back from Hempitecture and I said, I cannot change what I don't know. And if my goal is to change the building industry, if my goal is to change the materials that we use, I need to understand how we build conventionally. How do you change something that you don't know? You can't. You really can't. So I left that Idaho Basecamp project after it was finished, and I started working for a custom construction company here in Sun Valley. Weeks prior to me starting this, custom construction job, there was TV news stories about first commercial hempcrete building built in the United States on, the Boise news station, and it's feeling, pretty good, feeling kind of on top of the world. And so when I showed up to my new job to get some more experience, and I had all my tools and my shiny new nail bags, my boss at the time said, "No, you're not going to need those right now. Here's a broom, here's a dustpan. Go start sweeping over there and pick up the mess that everyone else has created." And so here I am thinking that I've just really had this great moment of success, and now I'm sweeping up wood waste and sawdust on the floor. Long story short is, with that experience of starting basically from the ground up, I learned framing, learned how buildings are actually built, learned how structural engineering is factored into a conventional project. And within 2 to 3 years, I was on-site foreman leading a framing crew of predominantly Spanish-speaking builders who I learned an immense amount from, who were incredibly talented, and finally started to get an understanding of the built environment and how it's delivered. With that experience, and then that other, early on experience of working with Hempcrete and understanding the challenges, I was then able to bring the two together. And ultimately, that kind of charted the next sort of path for Hempitecture. And that path was essentially on-site custom contracting of different building projects. That is a far cry away from the interlocking, insulating building block concept that I developed in 2012. But I realized this industry is not an industry, it's an idea. And we need to actually have projects put in the ground and actually build homes and create use examples of hemp-based buildings here in the United States. So my work took me from Bellingham, Washington, to Oregon, to upstate New York, to Pennsylvania, and even down to Texas. And I kind of looked up after some years of really being a traveling construction company and realized, this might not be a sustainable pathway forwards. I'm living in people's backyards, living in tents, living in people's tiny homes to build other people their dream homes. We have realized that the best way to help scale this emerging industry is to share everything that we have learned through our experience of working on site and basically create a platform for people to learn from us, learn with us. And in light of that, we've started a contractor training program. We've trained over 55 individuals from across the United States, even across the world, who come to our facility in Idaho. And I teach them everything that I learned through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to, learn how to build a hempcrete home. So with all that being said, that's kind of like the origin story and where we're going with this industry. And so now I'm going to just kind of talk a little bit more about the specifics and why hemp-based materials. Why was I so interested in this early on? Why do I still believe in this truly? And why is it a passion of mine today? Well, as I mentioned before, the built environment has some big problems. Carbon footprint, energy consumption, those are two of them. Outside of those, let's think about the materials that are used in our built environment conventionally. We have a lot of petrochemical-based plastic, synthetic materials that go into our home, and they lend to unhealthy indoor air environments. There's a great podcast out there, Trace Materials, from some professors at Parsons that really are kind of tracking the negative health implications of the built environment. So I believe right now we're kind of in the midst of not to sound dramatic here, because I don't think anything happens overnight, but in the midst of a paradigm shift. 10 years ago, if someone said to you that Burger King was going to have a plant-based burger, you would have said that's the most absurd thing I've ever heard. Well, a lot of industries are going plant-based. A lot of industries are looking to lower their carbon footprint, and the building industry is no different. Because the building industry is one of the largest portions of the pie chart, it has to be addressed. And without addressing that, we're not going to move the needle. So I'd like to think that right now, this plant-based trend is going to become the norm. You can see this in other huge multinational corporations. I don't know if it's because I spend a lot of time on hemp-based websites, but I keep getting targeted with ads from Colgate that's saying they're making a hemp seed oil toothpaste. I mean, who would have thought that that would have been a thing? So hemp-based materials from our perspective, and I think from probably a lot of perspectives that we would share here together on this call, is that it's a rapidly renewable resource, therefore can create more renewable, efficient feedstocks for other materials. At the very base level, industrial hemp is an agricultural commodity that can serve as a feedstock. There are plant constituents that are the end product, for instance, cannabinoids, which we really deal to no extent with cannabinoids because we're so focused on the fiber industry, the fiber and herd industry. Those products themselves are not necessarily products, they're feedstocks. So let's break that into two components here. When you have a hemp stalk, you have the inner wooden core. We call it hemp core because from our perspective, it conjures up more of an idea of the actual core of the stalk, the center of the stalk. The European terminology is herd or shiv. We like to call it hemp core. That is the wooden biomass that forms the center of the stalk. And actually, in the background here, you can see a rendering, a 20-color screen print that I did when I was in college. Again, very single track focus on hemp. Even my art background was about creating hemp-based designs, but that inner core is the wooden biomass, and then it's surrounded on the exterior with a long fiber. That fiber is then, what's used for textiles, nonwovens, clothing, lots of different things. With the processing of those, we can turn them into other things, value add to them by combining them with other things. And that's really where hempcrete begins. Hempcrete begins with the processed wooden core of the hemp stalk, and it is mixed with a specialized limestone-based binder. When combined with water in a very specific proportion and mixed in a very specific way, the material ultimately sets up and solidifies through a process that actually absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, stores it into the building material itself, and solidifies into a fireproof, insulating thermal mass wall. So again, our earliest focus was on hempcrete. It was with the building blocks. Our Idaho Basecamp building project, because we were not able to create building blocks, we said, how can we take what we view as an inherently labor-intensive process, this idea of mixing hempcrete and packing it into foreign boards around a structural frame? How can we, move the needle forward on this? Well, we created a panelized design. And as far as I'm aware, this was the first prefabricated panelized hempcrete building in North America, and helped us kind of envision what a more efficient construction delivery process might look like for hempcrete. Later in my talk, I'm going to talk about, what's kind of holding the industry back, and I'll talk a little bit more about that labor intensity. But, the point being is right now, hempcrete in the United States primarily exists in this cast in place fashion. There's a few different methods. There's cast in place, spray applied, and building blocks. Cast in place also transfers over to prefab panels. I don't want to get too hung up there, but really the idea of cast in place is like, imagine you're a baker, or actually imagine you're not a baker. And I send you sugar, flour, water, and say, here's a recipe, bake me a cake. And you say, well, I've never baked a cake before. How am I supposed to do this? The way hempcrete exists today is really similar. If you don't have any experience in mixing or forming or making the cake itself, the cake's not going to taste very good. The same thing goes for hempcrete. Right now we're supplying processed hemp, processed lime, and telling people, here's how you do this on site. This is the process. That is a drawback towards large scale adoption. And again, I'm going to touch on that a little bit more. With the use of hempcrete, you have some significant benefits. And I'm sure, most people here in this call have, read up a little bit on hempcrete. Maybe some of you have not, and this is the first time you're hearing about it. So forgive me if I start on a very remedial level. In general, hempcrete is insulating. It is cast with depth. You don't necessarily use hempcrete in the same depth that you would build a conventional wall assembly. Usually it's a thicker wall. 10 inches is about standard. 12 inches is common. 16 inches, you're really going to have quite an assembly. 24 inches, you're out of your mind. I'm just kidding about that, but it's a lot of work to make a 24-inch wall. The other benefits, fireproof. Hempitecture is the first company in the United States to conclusively prove that hempcrete is fireproof. We did an ASTM E84 test on behalf of a client that we had in Texas, where we got documentation that on a scale of 0 to 450, hempcrete scored a 0. 0 being the most fireproof material possible. In fact, so much so that the testing laboratory, Intertech, sent us a message afterwards and said, wow, this is really fascinating. Looking at this material, we would have thought that it would burn. The only other materials that we've seen score this well are concrete and rock wool. So huge potential there for hempcrete as a fireproof material, particularly in fire-prone areas. Another benefit of hempcrete is that it's a vapor buffering wall system. It's vapor permeable. Moisture can move in and out of the wall assembly. And ultimately what that results in is a more stabilized indoor air environment. There is a lot of technicality involved with vapor permeability. And if that's something that interests you, I encourage you to read more outside of this. But building science is something that is not within the scope that I can fully address here in the short time that we have today. But read more about hempcrete's vapor permeability. Even though it is vapor permeable, it's mold resistant. That's another huge element that makes hempcrete desirable. Mold within homes creates unhealthy indoor air environments. Unhealthy indoor air environments have negative impacts on our lungs, respiratory system, even neurologically. So there is this health component, sustainability component in terms of it's sequestering carbon dioxide. And then the other component is that energy efficiency, the energy that is saved in building. With hempcrete having a highly thermally resistant wall assembly. So that's kind of the hempcrete bucket. Again, that's where we really began, where our focus has been on. That's how we've established ourselves in this industry. In working on over 15 to 20 hempcrete building projects across the United States over the last 5 to 6 years, we have realized that there's some challenges with hempcrete in terms of its full-scale adoption. How bringing that to the next level. One of those challenges is the labor intensity in which hempcrete involves. Project sales cycles can be 2 years, 3 years. That's a long time for someone to, email you one day and say, hey, I've decided I'm going to build a hempcrete house, to 3 years later, furnishing them materials for their project. We think that there are ways of improving that process, making shorter sales cycles and making hempcrete more available. But it opened up our mind for the needs to really have a alternative building material that can help us get plant-based materials in the homes of more people. At the end of the day, we're a public benefit corporation. We have a vested mission to benefit both people and planet. And if we're only building 1-2 homes per year, how are we reaching that public benefit corporation mission? We're simply not. So with that in mind, we pivoted and expanded our scope and focus to incorporate hemp wool insulation. So that's kind of the next topic that I'm going to touch on is what is hemp wool? How is it used? And first off, you can see hemp wool exposed in our office here. I'm in our office here in Sun Valley, Idaho, and we actually leave the hemp wool exposed, no drywall on top of it. I'm telling you right now, if you went to Owens Corning's national headquarters, they're not going to be leaving their pink fiberglass insulation exposed because it's itchy, abrasive, toxic, all sorts of not good things. I think it speaks volumes to the fact that we have this office that I'd say we spend at least 40 hours a week in working out of, that we have our insulation exposed. It's a learning experience for people to come in here and see that this is truly a natural, healthy, non-toxic building material. It's installed just like other conventional insulation products. Take, for instance, rock wool. It is a pressure fit system, meaning there's no staples, no screws, no mesh, nothing to hold it in. It's just oversized and cut to fit within your stud bay cavity. The material composition itself is 90% hemp fiber and 10% binder. That binder basically just holds the hemp fiber together and creates a product with dimensional stability. Dimensional stability meaning it is not something that will just fall apart or is wispy. If you've ever worked with fiberglass, it's really got a cotton candy-like consistency. It's very lightweight, it lacks density, and it tends to slump in your wall cavity over time. Hemp wool will not do that because of that pressure fit concept. We tend to supply, projects for anything ranging from, someone doing a home renovation to insulation installers, general contractors, to architects who become repeat specifiers of hemp wool insulation. We are actually importing hemp wool from an international source right now. We own the U.S. trade name on hemp wool, but we are pivoting towards a more manufacturing-based model where we intend to manufacture hemp wool insulation here in the United States. To that end, we actually have a publicly facing fundraiser where we actually recently just passed our goal. So I'm not even going to ask you guys today and plead for you to please invest in Hempitecture, even though you can if you want, wefunder.com/Hempitecture. We've surpassed our $2.5 million goal to help build out this manufacturing facility in southern Idaho. So really, hemp wool is a focus area for us and moving forward. And we're going to be really focused on that to scale adoption of it, create not create ASTM standards, but quantify the ASTM standards that surround what will be coming off our manufacturing line, because our manufacturing line will have some unique properties that will make it a value added or more beneficial material versus what we are currently importing now. And so that kind of brings us to the next step. What is holding back the adoption of hemp-based building materials? Well, there's a few things. Let's kind of parse out these buckets. And bucket number one is hempcrete. As we learned traveling the country and building multiple hempcrete homes for many people, it is a labor-intensive, time-consuming, and did I say labor-intensive? Labor-intensive process. It is very, very difficult to work with hempcrete. The first 2 feet of a cast-in-place hempcrete wall, you're having a blast. Everybody is enjoying themselves. The radio's pumping, high five, spirits are good. The next 2 to 4 feet, you're now starting to work against gravity. 6 to 8 feet, you're now trying to figure out how to get this material up overhead, over your form boards and install it. 8 to 10 feet, we don't even want to go there. It is really, really a labor-intensive process, hitting your head against the rafters. Which speaks to this idea that hempcrete homes need to be designed for hempcrete, and the sequencing of a hempcrete installation needs to be factored in amongst the other subcontracted trades. And that last point that I mentioned about that last 2 feet of the wall section, well, if you have a roof that is fully sheathed overhead and you are no longer able to work below you and place the material above, that really is going to lower the efficiency of the install time. That's going to make it a much slower process. And so there's ways of sequencing the process of subcontracted trades and even the architectural design of a home to address the cast-in-place methodology. I'd liken cast-in-place to 3D printer. 3D printing is additive. It builds up in consecutive layers. The 3D printer will not print higher than the top course of that layer. If you have a roof overhead, that is going to limit the height of your 3D printer, in which case our 3D printers are human beings placing this material. And so you start to have to do more of an additive process where you're packing it sideways. So cast in place as it exists now, I believe, is niche, artisanal, beautiful, probably the highest quality element or method of delivery for hempcrete, but remarkably labor intensive. To address that labor intensity, how can we move forward past this niche artisanal project where Hempitecture is on a job site for a year and a half toiling on the same hempcrete wall assembly? Well, we looked at spray applied. Spray applied is a new method that I think is coming into the limelight a little bit more, and we actually spray applied the first hempcrete building in North America at Idaho Basecamp, kind of our prototype testing ground for hemp-based concepts, and we found that it really, really reduced the time in which it takes to build a hempcrete project. And that's a great thing because less time on site means lower cost, means a quicker project installation timeline. And since that project at Idaho Basecamp, we've done a few other spray applied projects. I do think that the spray applied technology has a little bit of a ways to go to really be fully implementable and adopted, but that is a strategy that I would suggest keeping your eyes on. In our point of view, the direction that hempcrete is going here in the United States is prefabricated building blocks that any mason can stack. It takes out the specialized niche labor expertise of a cast-in-place crew, and any mason with block stacking experience can stack these blocks. We just did a really exciting project that I feel is really innovative in Bozeman, Montana, where the house was framed out conventionally. The walls were infilled with hemp wool insulation. All the wiring, all the plumbing, everything was done traditionally. But instead of having, drywall finish on the inside, our clients opted for a veneer of hempcrete blocks. This veneer of hempcrete blocks was stacked on the interior, attached to that wall frame. And instead of having drywall or conventional finish, they're going to have a beautiful plaster finish from our partner, Limestrong Plaster, that is actually formulated and designed for hempcrete renderings. They will now have a 10-inch or so wall system that's going to be super insulating, moisture buffering, all the benefits that a hempcrete wall assembly invokes, with a quarter of the on-site labor time. The mason himself stacked this, I believe, 2,300 square foot house within a week and a half. It was done. If we were doing that with cast in place, that would have been probably 2 to 3 months. So that just gives you an idea of the time difference. So that's the hempcrete bucket. We need to work on methods and building typologies that allow it to be more scalable for this to really be adopted. I very much so believe that hempcrete is by far the most sustainable way of building a home. Building 1, 2, 3 homes per year is not going to move the needle or really create an industry around this. We need to figure out ways to increase widespread adoption. I think building codes need to come in line with certain elements of hempcrete so that we can understand it and present it to a building inspector, and they can say, okay, I understand this. This relates to my ASTM standard or my ICC standard. Right now, there's very preliminary work in that regard. And as far as I'm aware, the ASTM E84 test that we've done on hempcrete is one of the only or few pieces of hempcrete-specific testing done. We are working with both state and federal partners to speed up the adoption of this and look at code compliance and understand how we can bring this to the mainstream. On a state level, we have a $206,000 research grant from Idaho Department of Commerce to work with University of Idaho's Renewable Resources Lab to study how hempcrete performs, and then also study how hemp wool performs. On a federal level, my business partner, Tommy, is going to be representing Hempitecture at a Department of Energy fellowship at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which just a couple of weeks ago, this was top secret news. Now we are able to share this and celebrate this. But he will be a fellow basically studying hemp-based building materials for the next 2 years with the resources of the federal government. And that will help speed up the adoption of hempcrete and hemp bio-based materials, as well as help Hempitecture create a product roadmap for where we go from here. In terms of the hemp wool bucket, what's holding us back there? Well, one of which is cost. The cost is twice, if not 3x, the cost of fiberglass here in the United States because we're importing it. Imagine every truckload that we bring, adding $4,500 onto that cost, and then factor in the carbon footprint that then goes on top of that. It's not a long-term sustainable play to import this product. And that the same goes for hempcrete, really. It's not a long-term sustainable play to import hemp-based building materials. We need to localize and regionalize our supply chains, and our Idaho hemp wool manufacturing facility will do just that. We're going to be working with regional supply chain partners to source both hurd and fiber for different building material processes. We're even working with a mining company in southern Idaho to create a formulation of a limestone-based binder that we've actually been testing in our hempcrete contractor training companies. And so we already have a US-based hemp binder in development, which is really, really exciting because like I said, we need to regionalize the supply chain. The cost, the importation, the lack of codes, these are all things that are holding us back. I no longer believe that decortication or the lack thereof is holding us back. If I had a map with all of these different folks that say that they're going to open up a processing facility, that there's a lot of people that are saying that. Let's make sure that those companies are successful by identifying the end market to which they are selling. Make sure you have a customer in mind, because without that customer in mind, you're going to be processing industrial hemp, and you're not going to be able to pay the farmers because you're not going to have someone to buy the end product. So let's be cautious and respectful of our farmers, because I don't feign to know a lot about the agricultural side of this or exactly what it takes to grow industrial hemp. One thing I do know is that farming is not easy. It's a difficult job, and we want to give our farmers financial opportunity and not lure them into a trap, which will result in broken relationships and lack of payment being honored. So let's move cautiously, but let's really, focus on the end market. Who's going to be buying these products? In terms of my last section, where do we go from here and what's to come? I do think that the future is really bright for hemp-based building materials and other bio-based building materials. Tying back to that theme before of the sort of paradigm shift that we're experiencing, with a lot of industries evaluating plant-based alternatives and implementing plant-based methods to reduce carbon footprint, to be more environmentally friendly, and also to appeal to consumers, because that's what the consumers are now demanding. I think we're going to see more of that, and we're going to see top-down legislation coming that will help us scale this industry and help create maybe some more value in this supply chain for what is actually happening. What I mean there is, the federal government might be looking at, reducing the embodied carbon of our built environment. Well, that embodied carbon, where is it embodied? It's probably embodied in the cultivation of the product itself, or the rapidly renewable feedstock, industrial hemp itself. So maybe there'll be carbon credits for farmers so that they can make more profit on something that they're growing that has inherent environmental benefits, and then also can benefit their bottom line. None of that is for certain. Of course, it's speculative, but I believe that this is the trend and the direction in which we're going. I believe that our Department of Energy fellowship is in line with that, in that they are looking for more environmentally friendly building material solutions, and Hempitecture presents exactly that. In terms of the hemp wool industry and other bio-based building materials, we also think that that's bright. We see a lot of potential and opportunity here, especially given the scalability of hemp wool relative to hempcrete. And our Idaho facility, we believe, will be the primary source of building materials here in the United States. We have a team in place that is helping us build out this facility. We onboarded an advisor who is a PhD of textile engineering, who actually authored the U.S. patent for non-woven hemp insulation. So we're really working to create a company that's going to be long-lasting and help diversify these building products and make them mainstream accessible. It's not going to move the needle for our climate, our environment, or just the health of our built environment if we're only supplying a couple projects per year. We need wide scale buy-in. We are seeking to challenge some of the biggest incumbent industries out there, the synthetic petrochemical-based building materials industry. That's a big task to take on, yet we're not ones to shy away from a challenge like that. So we're really excited about the future of our business. We're excited about the future of other people buying into this industry. We're excited about the potential of more homes being built with bio-based, rapidly renewable materials, because really it's the direction that we need to go. So with that, thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer questions. I see we have 71 questions in the chat, so I'm not sure that I'll be able to get to all of them, but I'll do my best to answer the questions that Mandi wants to pull out.
There aren't 71, thank gosh. There's a lot of chat, but not all questions. So
that's a relief.
I think one question that keeps coming up, and I saw a couple of times in the questions that were submitted, are specs around the product that you're using, both the fiber as well as the hurd. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So I'll start on the hurd side. I think that is a question that's often asked, is what is the specification of the material that you're using? There is a range of different particle lengths, different degrees of cleanness. I think establishing a standard would be helpful. But in general, we specify hemp hurd in terms of, a 1/2-inch process, dust-free. We ask for samples all the time so that we know that, what we're intending to purchase is what we need. And we have a material library of samples that we've collected over the years. And we have everything from, the cleanest, most well-processed building grade hurd is what we'd call it, or building grade hemp core, to something that looked like it might have been grown in someone's backyard and has seeds and all sorts of impurities in it. It's really important to know what you're getting and always ask for samples. In terms of the U.S. supply chain coming on board to be able to produce that, I think it's still early. We saw companies like Sunstrand really take on a lot and were an exciting opportunity for the industry. But where they fell short, I think that other companies are going to be filling their place. I know that there's already, some processing happening in Colorado with relatively robust equipment. Formation Ag is in a few locations there processing what we consider building grade hemp core. And then Alberta, let's still think regionally. We're in Idaho, so just north of the border is not that far from us. There's no harm in our point of view right now to be purchasing this processed material from companies like Canadian Rockies Hemp or Innotech that are building out really state-of-the-art manufacturing, or I should say decortication facilities for these end use products. Of course, we want to keep our dollars in the U.S. economy, support U.S. farmers, and we're getting there. The industry is not built overnight. It takes time. It takes patience. But I think that in the not so distant future, it's going to be very likely that we can purchase hurd from a number of sources across the United States.
Okay. Good questions. There's lots that just came in. Now that we said this, they just flooded. So maybe we do have 71 now. But one question that just came in is, how flexible did you find the bomber spray machine in terms of compatibility with hemp hurd and of varied specifications?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so the equipment that they're referring to there is the Air-Easy spray applied system. The flexibility in the hurd is more so, it's more flexible than the binder itself. The binder is specifically formulated for spray application. So you could not use the binder that we've developed in Idaho from local sources to spray apply. It's a totally different material combination. The hurd itself within the Air-Easy spray application system needs to be a relatively small particle dimension. Longer hurd is more apt to clog the system. I think that system has a lot of potential, and we did work with that for a while, and there's a lot of improvements and iterations that are going to continue to happen on that system that will make it, I think, a more scalable and viable approach.
Awesome. Have you found any applications for the products in modular construction?
That's a good question. And we have not really sought out those relationships. And we've had some interest come in on sort of an inbound basis. We would love to have partners that are, creating prefabricated systems. We think prefabrication makes a lot of sense. The building industry itself is going to be moving in a prefabricated direction. Of course, Ketera, the very large prefabrication company that was SoftBank funded, did just fail, but don't let that discourage us from the potential of prefabrication. I think a lot of companies are going to come in and start trying to fill the void left by Ketera. We just have not had room for distributor relationships or wholesaling on our materials because they're already so costly as it is. So we need to, just be focused on what we have in front of us and building out our capabilities to then have those wholesale relationships, to have the possibility of working with modular companies. In terms of prefabricated hemp Crepe projects, we've done a number of experimental projects that have included on-site built prefabricated panels or off-site prefabricated built panels. We built a number of cabins, tiny houses, and even our first 2,000 square foot building project at Idaho Basecamp was a modular designed building. It was cast in place on site in panels, but we were just looking at ways to increase the efficiency of that on-site delivery time. So yes, I do think that there's a lot of potential there for incorporating hemp-based building materials into on-site construction projects.
Okay, we'll just do a couple more questions because we're at about an hour and I don't know where you're at for time. And so I want to be respectful of your time. Just holler at me. But there was a question about my micronized hurd for plastics. Do you know anything about this subject? And then there was a big shout out in the same comment. Thank you very much for everything you're doing.
Well, thank you so much for the shout out and great question. To be, perfectly honest, we are very myopically focused on building materials and their application, particularly related to, hempcrete and hemp wool products. Micronized hurd as a filler or feedstock in plastics is something that I'm hearing more about. I'm learning more about, but I don't know enough about it to speak knowledgeably about it. My hope is that there are people out there that are really focused on polymers and increasing the sustainability elements of plastics to push that forward. But I cannot speak to that knowledgeably.
Cool, thank you. Is there a difference in performance in the walls that are built cast in place versus the blocks?
Great question. I would say that blocks are actually more consistent in cast in place in terms of their performance because they're all made under the same condition and they're made by machinery, an automated process. So cast in place is very variable to what you have in the wall, the different heights of the wall that you're at. So I'd say that there is more variability in a cast in place wall assembly versus building blocks. I think building blocks we're going to see more of that. And we've got, a lot of requests coming in for building blocks and working on projects that they want to incorporate building blocks on. From our point of view, there might be a higher cost right now for utilizing those building blocks, but the time that you save in labor on site and just the installation costs are going to be far lower than what you'll end up paying with the cast in place methodology.
So you've got an upcoming event and you're training, I believe, here pretty soon. Can you speak to how do people get involved and how do people reach out to you if they're trying to learn more, educate, and train?
Yeah, great question. So we have an event coming up, as you just mentioned, called the Hemp Building Summit. This is the third annual Hemp Building Summit that we've organized, and it is an agnostic platform designed to elevate all those who are working within the hemp building industry. While Hempitecture are the organizers of it, we do not, it's not about Hempitecture. It's about companies that conceivably would be our competitors. We're really just working to create a platform that's designed professionally, advertised professionally, and brings in professional speakers to elevate this industry as a whole, because we feel that what is needed is bringing this into the mainstream, tying in, relationships from the architectural built environment world, from the carbon drawdown world, and the hemp building world. We have to have multiple stakeholders at the table, and that is what this conference is designed to represent. Our conference is going to be in Austin, Texas this year. Last year, of course, we had a virtual conference due to the pandemic, but we're really excited to get back to an in-person format. And the event itself is going to be held at the Austin Public Library, which is a LEED Platinum building, has won numerous awards for its architectural design, sustainability, energy efficiency, you name it. So we feel that it's going to be the perfect venue to accelerate action towards more sustainable building practices, which at the end of the day, that's what building with hemp is. It's a more sustainable building practice. We're not, discriminatory against other building practices. We believe that there are a lot of complementary products, materials, ideas that play into a hemp-based assembly. And so you'll also can expect to see and hear from speakers outside of just the hemp sphere itself at our upcoming event. You can learn more about it at hempbuildingsummit.com. We actually have an early bird ticket special right now. The ticket price is going to go up to $300 in a couple of weeks here. We're going to be announcing more keynote speakers. We have a really exciting author who I can't share yet. I wish I could, but an award-winning book on carbon and the climate, and some other really great speakers. So that's the Hemp Building Summit happening October 29th, Austin, Texas, hempbuildingsummit.com. And then the other event that we have happening monthly is a contractor training session. We created the contractor training session program because we saw that there was a need to educate builders on the proper practices for implementing hemp building techniques. Since we have started this session, we've trained over 55, or this series, we've trained over 55 individuals from across the United States on how to build with hempcrete. And we want to continue to train people. What you get when you come to hempcrete contractor training is not just an overview, not just on-site, it's everything. It is from, theory and concept to us literally giving you the estimation tools and the software systems that we have created to evaluate building projects, to how does hempcrete integrate into not just one type of wall assembly, but multiple kinds of wall assemblies. What are the mixing techniques? We have multiple mixers that we use in hempcrete contractor training. And then, of course, when you come to hempcrete contractor training, we give you a discount when you purchase materials from us to create longstanding relationships with contractors and folks that are looking to get involved with this space. We have a few more on the books, but they are filling up. I'm not even sure if we have any availability, but I'd recommend going to hempitecture.com and going to the Hempcrete tab and checking out the Hempcrete contractor training section and seeing if you can get an application in. And we'd love to have you here in Ketchum, Idaho. One last thing on Hempcrete contractor training is most people think they're coming to us for just a training and a workshop. They also don't realize that they're getting a vacation in one of the world's most beautiful ski destinations. So that's always a kind of cherry on the top for when people come into our trainings.
And it really is beautiful up there. I know quite a few people. And yes, it's awesome. Okay, so there's lots of other questions. You'd mentioned, and I'll just do a couple more so we can get out of here before it's too late. But one of the questions you'd mentioned, or something you mentioned, was state-of-the-art decortication facility. Can you name some of the facilities that you've seen that are really popping up, or people? I know you mentioned Formation Ag as one.
Yeah, so I think there's a few schools of thoughts on processing, and let me preface everything that I'm about to say with I am not an expert in processing by any means. Maybe familiar by proxy, just since it's pretty core to what we're doing. One school of thought I think is hammer milling, which I think is ideal for some applications. It's usually a lower cost to entry. I think that there's a little bit of disdain towards hammer milling because it tends to damage the fiber and create lesser grade outputs. But for some applications, it might work great. Then there's other applications or other decortication methods that are much more involved, that have multiple steps of cleaning and fiber separation and dust removal and combing. That would be more akin to, like a Tatham system or a LaRoche system. These are systems that, fit into a 20 to 40,000 square foot building. They're not something that, go in your garage. So the scale has to be sized appropriately for what you are doing. Maybe you're just cultivating industrial hemp on, a small amount of acreage, and you want to separate it into animal bedding or something and kind of just have an on-site system. Hammer milling might work great for that. And there's a gentleman from Montana, Andrew Bishop, who's really been, I think, kind of leading the hammer milling side of things. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you have your Formation Ags or your Canadian Greenfield Technologies, and then you have the mega systems, the LaRoche, the Tathams. We're really excited about what we're seeing in Alberta coming online. Some really sophisticated state-of-the-art processing systems, which for our end uses, we need to be partnered with those larger players, the state-of-the-art processors, because our quality threshold is relatively high. It's not as high as, say textile grade, but large output, large throughput, and consistent supply. And then other companies in Montana that are coming up, IND Hemp for one, a great, US-based American company that I think we should keep an eye on and look forward to and see how we can support and cheer on their success.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you very, very much, Mattie, for your time. I'm super excited to have you. I'd love to continue to collaborate. Also, I'd love to share your event if you'll send me any information, I can put it out in our newsletter and make sure that people are aware of it as well. But if anybody else has any questions or anything that you need, don't hesitate to reach out to me at any time. I'm happy to help make connections or build these relationships, bring the questions forward that you guys are looking to have answered. Mattie, is there anything else you want to share real quick before we wrap up?
Yeah, just one last thing, very quickly here. I am scrolling through these comments, and I just want to thank everyone for being so engaged in this conversation. So many amazing compliments and excellent questions. And I wish I could answer all of them, but we're at our time here. And so I'd invite everyone to connect with me on LinkedIn. I go by Mattie, so Mattie Mead on LinkedIn. And then also feel free to check out our WeFunder campaign. Again, no plea to invest if you'd like. And our investors on our WeFunder campaign will get to share in the upside as well as risk. I'm obligated to say that, of our endeavor as we embark upon the next chapter of our business, which is manufacturing hemp-based building materials here in the United States. And I can assure you with our Department of Energy program, with our Idaho research program efforts, hemp wool is just going to be the tip of the iceberg that you see from Hempitecture. So thanks again, everyone, for really these amazing questions, amazing comments. It was really a pleasure to be here with you today. I hope you guys are leaving feeling inspired and excited, because I sure am. So thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your week.
You're awesome. Thank you very, very much. We'll get back together and do this again. And real quick, I think there were comments shared or links shared. Next Tuesday is our carbon meeting that we're discussing the carbon sequestration and everything involved in it, from the soil to the avoidance and the sequestration. So I'd love to invite you to join us. The link is in the chat, but it's also on our website at globalhempassociation.org. If you have any other questions, again, don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll see you then.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, guys.